Yes, hi, Mr. Nabihan.
Hello.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Since I'll be starting first, let me set up my PowerPoint. Okay.
Yeah. For the online participants, if you have any question, feel free to type in your questions, or you can raise your hand and just ask the question at the end of the session also if you want to voice out verbally. So over to you, Mr. Nabihan.
It's okay. You can give me a second to adjust a bit.
No problem.
Okay. Um, how's the present? Can you see both me and my slides?
Yes.
Okay. Uh, just want to make sure. All right. So, okay. Do you only see the slides or just to be sure?
Yep. So far, I think you can share both also can. It means that you can share your slide at the same time. You also be visible. It's fine.
Okay. Because like I want to use my hang on, let me all right. Now, okay. Sorry, this is taking a while. Okay. Okay. All right. All right. Can you see me now?
Yes.
Okay. Along with the slides. Okay. Okay. So am I allowed to begin?
Yep, please.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nabihan bin Nawawi, and I'm here to present to you all on my research proposal on the perception of Malaysian primary school English teachers and their use for gamification. Let us begin. Now, before we start, we have a presentation outline. I'll be covering from background, my reason for researching, the questions, my methodology, my participants, research instrument, and last but not least, my anticipated findings. Now let us start. What is gamification? Gamification is like, you know your video games? Well, gamification is when you implement the game elements of it and you put them into a educational environment or setting into your teachings. You may, most notably, you will see something like a point system, time limits, leaderboards, or even quizzes, as these are the most popular methods of gamification when it comes to like teaching English, or for example. The thing about gamification that makes it so unique is that it is both intrinsic and extrinsic motivated for students. Since with intrinsic, students may want to be like they want to be achievement oriented. They wanted to have a sense of belonging, or maybe they want to be more, but they want to be better than everybody else. If extrinsic, they want something like a reward, like maybe some sort of prize, like how you see in a competition, or even some candies, for example. Whether it's intrinsic or extrinsic, the thing is that gamification can be used for edutainment to any kind of students, whether they are familiar with the method or not. The positive thing about gamification is that it is very engaging for students, as it will motivate them to be more interested into what they learn from what the teacher has given to them. Some notable examples would be Kahoot, quizzes, as these are for e-learning, but even offline, there's like group cooperation, even competitive activities. Let me give you some examples. As I said, Kahoot is like a game-based learning method where you can like During real-time group classes, whether online or offline, you can like make your own multiple choice question, true or false, or even open answer-ended questions for students to write. These kinds of gamification methods and tools can be used to assess the students' English knowledge on how much they currently know, and you can even integrate YouTube into it to make it more inclusive for synchronous learning. Quizzes here is quite similar to Kahoot, as it provides better student insight on how the students are performing with their assessment, but also maintain the engaging, fun, and even competitiveness among the student when learning English. The teachers can also provide a more self-paced option if students do not want to feel too much pressure during their learning process of English. If you're not sure about gamification yet, well, you may know about these ones. Do you know Scrabble? I'm pretty sure most who have been learning in school have known about Scrabble. You can say it's a form of gamification because it contains like a point system, timer, and even has some competitive fun with leaderboards. And because it involves learning, it can be gamification. Gamification can be both offline and online. So you can see here in the picture, there's a leaderboard as well, and of course, students uh, cooperating with each other. That is how gamification can be very useful. Now, the thing about gamification is that it is very compatible with plentiful teaching methods, most notably the blended learning flipped classroom method. For those who don't know, blended learning is like a mix of online and physical classroom environment. In one session, you teach in class, but in another session, you can do it online. And gamification can work for both scenarios. Gamification has been used worldwide due to its effectiveness for better language acquisition among students, including English, and even in Malaysia, as there's a case of a mobile app that improves the students' spelling and behavior in a Malaysian rural school. And of course, these kinds of methods, you have to constantly plan, need the right skills for it, require the cooperation between students and teachers, and you also need the resources like the internet, money, and devices that are necessary for it. The gamification scene also contains some unfamiliar barriers that may discourage teachers from fully implementing gamification to its full potential as well. Thus, this leads to my prime reasons for research. I have noticed there was a research gap in Malaysian urban primary schools, both public and private, as there have been plenty of rural school researchers on gamification. But somehow the urban schools in particular, is lacking. So I want to provide better insight on urban primary schools, students and teachers' perspective and the characteristics through a retrospective angle. If you don't know what is retrospective angle is like you want to look back at the previous experience that people have in their certain moments. Another thing I want to clarify is that I want to also verify if these teachers have the same perception or any differences in gamification and its uses, because like if developing countries can also use gamification well, how would the Malaysian teachers particularly in primary English schools will handle gamification? There may also be a possibility for e-learning with gamification, like I mentioned, the like Kahoot or quizzes, or maybe another learning tool we probably have no idea of. Here are some examples. In Sri Lanka, gamification is known to have encouraged more collaborative skills among primary school students, while in Romania, even if it's only through survey questionnaire, we have found out that there's like improve in English academic performance over there. So now, what about Malaysia? Would it be the same as well? Thus, this leads to my three research questions. My first one, what is the perception of the idea of gamification for English teaching among Malaysian primary school teachers? I want to find out if these students, it's not students, teachers, if they think that they actively used it, they rarely used it, or they they find it effective or may have a few concerns about the method. Secondly, would be the approach. What approaches would Malaysian primary English teacher implement when using gamification English teaching to students? This is more of the how, because I want to see how the teachers will use in gamification method. Do they mostly use it online, or do they prefer to use it in physical classroom? Do they try to borrow templates from other gamification learning tools, or they create their own? There's a huge amount of possibilities. Last but not least, what are the challenges and barriers preventing Malaysian primary school teachers from applying gamification in English teaching? This one we want to see if there's any information that is either common or anything surprising that prevents gamification overall among them. For the contribution to this study, I hope this study will help determine like if the curriculum actually influence teacher decision to implement gamification due to how student oriented it may be, and see if the gamification overall provides more character insight on the Malaysian primary school teachers and the students overall. It can be from a writing perspective, a speaking perspective, maybe group activities, and how much engagement they have mustered up. This is also to help determine what are the hidden barriers to help teachers overcome or how to help encourage more gamification in the Malaysian setting. My main methodology for this will be the mixed method methodology, which is a mix of quantitative and qualitative. Quantitative is going to be survey questionnaires, since it will be very flexible for me, but it will also be limited in scope and may be possibly minimal in returns. Hence, that is why I need to have qualitative interviews, because with interviews, I can obtain unobservable info and inner thoughts of my participants. And this is something that not even the questionnaires can even do. With both data combined, I can triangulate them for higher qualitative comprehensive views and ensure my research overall is more believable and justified. Of course, I will consider with the ethics of the research, as I want to make sure my participants have proper privacy, full consent, and of course, avoid any cases of bias. Now, my first phase, of course, will be to gather the quantitative data through survey questionnaires. After that, I will be analyzing them and doing a comparative relationship on the survey data given. And after I finish that, I'll be moving on to phase 2. For phase 2, I'll be using interviews to obtain qualitative data. And once I have done that, I'll also do the same with data analysis and comparing the interviews through transcribing. And once I've done that, I can interpret my findings and implement my recommendations overall of the research of gamification. Now, for my survey questionnaire and quantitative method, I picked this one because, as I said, it's flexible, but it's also simpler, better for reach, allow larger sample testing, and of course contains both close-ended and open-ended questions. With close-ended questions, it's more direct, straightforward, and verified. But with open-ended questions, I can provoke some sort of critical thinking among participants and also dig better information among them. Like you can see here in my section, you can see I have a rating system that can show how likely or very unlikely teachers may prefer a certain gamification method. Of course, the issue with survey questionnaires is that everyone takes surveys nowadays. So it becomes so common that it's a fatigue thing. And even then, surveys require the researcher to have self-judgment and personal analysis, which can lead to problematic biases, even to myself. This is why I also implemented interviews as well, as interviews are basically a Q&A with the participants, question and answers. This is so that I can gather a better understanding on their reasoning, the rationale, and the perspective on how they use gamification, what is the perspective, and using in-depth questions, I'll be able to garner deeper quality of questions and answers among the participants. with interviews, I can also gather more context behind the scenes related to their time, their background, and setting of. Since I'm also using like a retrospective, so they both fuse well together. For my research instrument, I'll be using a simple set questionnaire with 40 questions divided into 3 sections using Microsoft Forms. Now, section A will be 5 questions in more demographic personal data of the participants. Of course, they will be classified, and they will be rated to question 1 on perception to decipher and explore the teacher's perspective overall. Section B will be focused on 6. We'll be having 6 questions involving research question 1 and 2 to help seek reasons why participants have different perception and approaches on how they use gamification methods. Last but not least will be question 3 questions to focus on research question 3 and focus on the potential barriers and challenges when it comes to using gamification in their settings. For my interview research instrument, I'll be having 9 main questions, and each of the 3 will be focused on perception, approach, and challenges related to the research questions. Of course, even with all these structured questions constructed here, I will also doing unstructured questions through semi-structured interview by doing follow-ups and pressing in any important information I can gather during my interviews. And to ensure the reliability and validity of this interview, I'll be using verbatim recording like Otter, Microsoft 365, and Vivo, and for me to transcribe and analyze my interviewing data. My participants will be at least 37 respondents based on raw soft analysis, and there will be teachers from Malaysian urban primary schools, most notably public and private. I'll be using teacher networking to reach to them and using the random sampling method to help increase my odds of getting more participants. Of course, these participants need to have at least primary school English level teaching, and they must have gamification knowledge, because if without gamification knowledge, then it's not going to be useful for this research. And here is my project time of research. Next month in January, I will be obtaining my ethic application from the government department and SUREC. And after that, I will be able to conduct my survey and interview to collect data and for transcribing, then analysis, interpret my finding for my thesis, and of course, implementing my recommendations. Last but not least, my anticipated finding is that I believe the Malaysian urban primary school students, their main issue may have been lower attention span because more video games, more digital media. And so now that these students need to have more engagement, teacher may have to implement gamification method to ensure they become more interested. Of course, gamification also requires time to adapt and to understand, because it's not that straightforward to design gamification for teachers. But it is also possible that gamification will be positively received, but it will require rapid, spontaneous changes and for teachers to adapt towards the student taste. Of course, like not everyone's going to like leaderboards, not everyone's going to like being together in a group. Some prefer to play alone, for example. So that's one of my anticipated findings. Another one will be gamification for English for participation, motivation, and assessment, since these 3 are most likely effective for teachers to use, but it's not good for evaluating the students' performance, since that is more for like exams, presentations, or even essays, for example. And of course, I want to see if the curriculum will help influence, actually, if they have a part in influencing more student-oriented approaches, which gamification is actually student-oriented, for example. In conclusion, the research on gamification perception by Malaysian urban primary school teachers, both public and private, through retrospective is a very unique approach for me to conduct. I'll be able to test if they have identical gamification stances, whether they are active or not so active in the Malaysian setting. And of course, I'll be using mixed methods, using quantitative survey questionnaires and qualitative interviews for deeper interpretation, as well as more unique data that may surprise even myself. Hopefully, with this information, I'll be able to use this to help improve the gamification method and encourage more Malaysian teachers to try this method in more urban primary schools, both public and private, and maybe to you too. Thank you. Any questions and answers? Okay.
All right. Thank you.
All right.
So let's see any questions.
Okay, what's the
Quite interesting. Yeah, I think you are proposing ready to roll out this project soon.
Mm-hmm. So any questions or anyone?
Hello, I have a question.
Yeah, thank you, please.
My
Hello.
name is Suzy. So my first questions, I would like to ask if you have conduct the pilot study before you proceed with your mixed method, because I understand that your presentation mentioned that you have used the mixed method, isn't it? The quantitative and the qualitative. So are you using the pilot test first before you proceed to this methodology?
Yes, I know that I may be quite new to this kind of thing, but I also want to make sure that my methodology methods are properly conducted. So I do have colleagues and of other friends of the same level to conduct a pilot test to see if my questions, whether survey questionnaires or my interview are like effective or not for this research overall.
Okay, for the item that you have provided in your quantitative method, for example, after you collect the data from a respondent, any tools or software that you are using for you to get the result from it?
Tools?
Yeah, for example, like SPSS, because you're using quantitative, right? Are you
Yes.
going to use I'm sorry, are you using the SPSS?
I'm using Microsoft Forms, or is that uh, a different method you mean? You mean like how am I going to conduct my survey tool kind of
No,
thing?
no, no. I mean, when you, okay, I know that you are using the quantitative, right? So you have all the items that consist of the structured questions. So when you have the data that you collected from your respondent, so are you using the SPSS as a tools for you to get the result from it? Because you are just now you mentions that you are testing on the relationship just now in your slide, the relationship and the comparison. So are you going to use the SPSS?
Um, most likely will. I will look into that if that's okay.
Last questions. May I know how many respondent or informant for this research that have conducted by you?
How many respondents?
Yeah,
I did mention 37 of them, if that answers your questions.
sorry, cannot hear you clearly.
37.
37. So both for quantitative and qualitative method that you use for the research, you have that number only?
Yes, although I estimate that for the qualitative side, it will be less due to being, more qualitative, harder to interpret. So it'll probably be like at least around, I'd say 10 for qualitative, or the rest while the remainder will be for quantitative.
So it sounds like it's not balanced, yeah?
Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
Okay. Any challenges that when you are conducting the qualitative method?
You mean the challenges for conducting interviews?
Yeah.
I'd say one issue is that for from an ethic perspective, it'll be more like I have to make sure like the teacher, the respondents, all their information has to be confidential, be their appearance, their address and all and such. So that's one challenge. But another challenge is that unlike I'll be mostly maybe conducting like online, and if it's going to be online interview, it's going to have issues regarding like body language, expression, and something that not a physical interview can do. So while physical interview is much more recommended for me to do due to my like COVID-19 like restrictions and all that, I may have to do more online, and online kind of has limitations regarding like uh, getting data from participants regarding how they perceive gamification.
Okay, maybe you can put this kind of answer in terms of limitations of your study, because I'm looking forward what is the challenges that you're faced, because you're a researcher, you're the one who conduct the interview, for example, right? So you know better, you know more on what challenges that you're facing. So maybe in your research you can put in on the limitations of the scope study.
Got it. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Mhm.
Very good. I think just now Susie really help you to crystallize some of the areas that you should take note on the methodology part. Yeah. So maybe we still have some time, maybe for one or two more questions.
Okay. Any questions, if that's okay? Anyone? Do you have a question, Mr. Chong, Dr. Chong?
So I just thinking to see the floor. Do they have any question or not? Yeah. So, okay, I think just now, for only one question for me. I think just now, Mr. Nabihan, you mentioned you wish to have the people get the way the teacher has some gamification knowledge. So how do you quantify that?
This one here.
Yeah.
The what? Why? What was the question again?
My question is testing. Can you hear me? Yeah, my question is, since you mentioned here, specify the participants should have a gamification knowledge. So how do you quantify this to get eligible or not? With this gamification knowledge, how do you can pass your qualifications? How do you verify they have gamification knowledge?
Okay. With that, one way I do that is like for my quantitative method, I tend to have like a yes and no question if they have use gamification or not, and like one if they can answer yes or no, and if they don't, then I can already consider that one be that way I can tell whether they have input gamification or not using survey questionnaires. So I know my not every of my survey questionnaires are gonna be like big in return. So in order to ensure like my survey questionnaires know what they are doing, I want the yes and no question in survey questionnaires will help determine if they know or not. Does that answer your question?
thank you. But I think maybe you can.
Hello?
Can you hear me? Hello, Mr. Nabiha. Yeah, I can.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, I can hear you.
As I was saying, one of my questions in my survey will be like a yes and no on if they know gamification or not. Since surveys, yeah.
I just my personal suggestions. Maybe you can consider as well instead of asking yes and no only. Maybe you can list out some of the common gamification tools online. So maybe their involvement level, yeah, so that you can roughly gauge their knowledge on the gamification knowledge are there at a novice or medium or expert level as well.
Because some may realize they know without realizing, for example, is that it?
Okay, thank you. So maybe it seems like no more questions from the floor. So I think it should be that's all. Thank you so much, Mr. Abihan, for your interesting sharing. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Right. So we're going to have our next presenter is Mr. Wang Weijin. So let's wait for time to allow the file to be transferred. Get ready. Thank you.
So I'll be talking a bit here. So I'll just talk to this and present on that and look at the slide. Can, yeah, no problem. Yeah, no problem.
All right. So good afternoon, everyone. Our next presenter is Mr. Wang Weijin. His topic actually is student perspective on learning experiences in a predominantly flipped classroom-based pharmacy program or qualitative study. So over to you, Mr. Wong.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chong, and thank you very much to the organizing committee as well. So, very good afternoon, everyone. Just a little bit about myself. I'm from Peninsula, and to be honest, I've been quite embarrassed to say that it's only my second time to Kuching. In the last time I was here was 15 years ago, and I'm really enjoying my time here so far. Really thank you also to the organizers for having this conference on. I think I don't know about everyone else on the call, but for some of us, we took a while to adapt to an online conversation, and now we're taking a while to adjust back to a face-to-face conversation. And so really just thank you for the opportunity to be here today and to present this talk titled Students' Perspective on the Learning Experiences in a Predominantly Flipped Classroom-Based Pharmacy Program, a Qualitative Study. A little bit about myself. I'm a pharmacist by practice. Majority of my time so far have been spent as a pharmacist. I'm an early career educator, I consider myself. And really, if we could go to the next slide, thank you. I think for most of us, we can fully have recognized that healthcare is dynamic and complex. If I can introduce to you Mr. L. Mr. L's 40-year-old gentleman who was diagnosed with diabetes, got started on metformin, a tablet. Over 5 years has not been controlled well, needs to get on insulin injections, goes and visits his friendly community pharmacist to get some of his medicines, and finds that it's not been managed very well. And so the community pharmacist tries to help Mr. L and tries to educate him on how to use his medicines wisely and hopes that he is able to use them correctly. Fast forward a few more years, because diabetes is a risk factor for cardiovascular disease, he develops a stroke and gets admitted to hospital. While in hospital, he develops chest infections where he needs a different antibiotic called vancomycin, which then requires a pharmacist working in the hospital to come and work together with a doctor to measure the levels. Because of the unique properties of the medicine, they have to adjust the dose and they have to work collaboratively with the doctor to get the best dose for Mr. L. Fast forward a few more weeks, he gets better, he recovers from his stroke, he recovers from his chest infection, but because of his stroke, he needs to get started on a whole bunch of different tablets, and a pharmacist in the hospital talks to him and helps him, educates him as well on how to use his tablets. That 30 seconds or 1 minute was just an attempt to describe the different roles pharmacists can play in the whole healthcare continuum, and the different skill sets that they need to do their job effectively. Add to that the ongoing industrial revolution and also the technology disruption. Really, there's lots of things happening around us, and when we think about a pharmacist being a vital member of healthcare team, there's different skill sets that are required for them to work effectively and to be able to perform and to help the patient that's in front of them. In line with that, there's been obviously calls on how pharmacy education then can be improved on how we can prepare pharmacists better for the pharmacists of tomorrow. At the School of Pharmacy at Monash University, Malaysia, we work collaboratively with our counterparts in Australia, where we seek to try to innovate and try to promote leadership in pharmacy and pharmaceutical science education. Next slide, please. Thank you. So over a few years, and finally coming to 2017, the faculty took a decision to revamp the whole syllabus, where the 4 years Bachelor Pharmacy program in honours incorporated a strong element of the flipped classroom pedagogy. As most of us are aware, the flipped classroom is an innovative and effective pedagogy that's been used in various different forms, whether locally, globally, in the various teaching institutions as well. So as part of the flipped classroom style as well, collaborative learning strategies like Think, Pass, Share has been used to help develop higher order thinking skills. And this is particularly relevant when we think about the challenges that the pharmacists of tomorrow and together with the pharmacists of today do face. And so the Bachelor of Pharmacy program here at our university is one of the few programs that adopts a predominantly flipped classroom model across its entire program. Literature tells us that there have been schools that have adopted elements of the flipped classroom in their own syllabus, but only in maybe in 1 unit or 2 units. But our program here at Monash, Malaysia, we take the whole program and we've incorporated the flipped classroom modality. consider to that as well the unique multicultural environment and the diverse student background that we have here in Malaysia, where the pre-education programs are different. We sought then to explore students' perspective to further understand the nuances and the challenges that this environment can have. Next slide, please. So again, this is to highlight our one of the aspired graduates attributes that we do think that our graduates will come up from our university with, and we think that having a program which has flipped classroom, we think that this can help develop skills like integrity, teamwork, inquiry, and help with their communication skills and of course problem solving and critical thinking. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in this project, together with the research team, we got ethics approval from the Monash University Human Research Ethics Committee for this. We conducted 5 semi-structured focus groups with a total of about 18 students from the different years of study, so years 1 to 4. Each group consisting about 3 to 4 students per group, and each group as well were unique, where we did not mix the year levels. So for example, a group, each focus group will have, for example, year 1 students, another group will have year 2 and years 3 and years 4. I think where we saw our uniqueness for this was that the students coming into the university all had different pre-university education background, coming from A levels, from UEC, or from our Monash University Foundation year, and each of these pre-university program has its unique teaching pedagogy or teaching styles. So interviews were transcribed verbatim and thematically analyzed to identify the themes. Comparison was made also between the research team to check the reliability of coding, and so we did Cohen's kappa coefficient to test the level of agreement as well, and where K was more than 0.7, we considered a satisfactory agreement in the analysis. Thank you. Next slide. So some of the themes that came about from our focus group was this idea of initial barriers to adaptation. So recall that I mentioned that because of the uniqueness of our student cohort here in Malaysia, where they come from different schooling systems and different pre-U backgrounds, we noticed that students were more suited to different styles of learning. This student here, a year 1 student from the UEC programs, commented that my public speaking skills are not good, so I need time to prepare. So I think I can't really adapt to these kind of workshops. So as part of our program as well, there's a strong focus on presentation and communication skills. So we noticed that some students from different backgrounds had some initial challenges to adapting and talked about this. But over time, we noticed that they do adapt and then they get used to it. And so another theme that came across was these reasons for adaptation. So a year 3 student commented, I got used to it, and it's actually interactive lecture, like you said. I mean, interactive design is actually good for us in the long term, especially for medical students like pharmacy or medicine doctors, because they need to continuously learn just because of the nature of the industry. And so this student was able to recognize that there was a value in the style of how the program was developed. Next slide, please. Thank you. Now, when we think about time taken for them to adapt, this student commented, a year 2 student commented that she felt really stressed out when she first started, but according to her, she took about 1 semester to completely adjust to it. Some of the comments that another theme that came about was this perceived benefit of learning time management skills. And so this student in years 4 commented, this whole new curriculum has really given me the flexibility of time. I'm in charge of my time, my study and everything, and I can arrange my time freely. Another theme that came about was students commenting on how their communication and teamwork skills also improved. So these are the quote from a year 2 student. I would say it's way better than traditional learning style because there's more variation and we get to work in groups. There's more discussions going on and you get to work out your communication with other teammates as well. Thank you. Next slide, please. So when asked if it was given a chance to redo, 13 out of the 18 study participants indicated they would go through a flipped classroom style of learning, even though recognizing there were some initial challenges to it, while 5 out of 18 had no comments or no preferences. As we all aware, the Malaysian education system adopts probably a more traditional classroom style across the primary and secondary education, maybe for some pre-university programs, where the educator is perceived as the general source of authority. And so majority of learning happens in the class, in the classroom, in the 4 rooms. When we think about a flipped classroom, where a lot of the learning happens in the students' own time outside the 4 walls through their pre-class activities, and then they come only into the when they come to the classrooms, the more majority of the time is spent on application-style learning. We felt that we really wanted to understand a little bit better on how our students felt about this, because literature tells us as well that there are some suggesting that it's useful and some suggesting otherwise as well. So for some students, their time here at the School of Pharmacy and Monash University in Malaysia really is their first exposure to the flipped classroom style, where students are expected to complete the pre-class activities and then to come to class and then to take part in collaborative learning activities. So we found that students' initial feelings varied across the different education backgrounds, but do normalize with the duration of exposure, with some describing initial challenges. But even with the initial challenges, students did recognize the usefulness of this style of learning, describing how it has the potential to develop the life skills and being better prepared for life beyond university. Thank you. Next slide. So in conclusion, we've really set out to identify some of the unique challenges and concerns when implementing a predominantly flipped classroom pharmacy curriculum in our setting, together with some students' perspectives on the benefits for personal development. So these perspectives can definitely help guide the implementation of large-scale flipped classroom pedagogy in similar settings to help support equitable learning experiences. I just really wanted to acknowledge as well that this work was funded by an internal grant from the school, and really like to acknowledge the contributions of our participating students as well. Thanks again for your listening here. I now welcome any questions or any comments as well. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Okay, so now the sessions for the questions and answer sessions. So if anyone, the participants online or inside here, so have any questions, so feel free to discuss. So there's a comment. I like the idea of flipped classroom.
Okay, can I see? Oh, okay. Sure. Oh, so somebody's commented there. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So the flipped classroom is definitely something interesting, and for myself as well as an early career educator, it took a while for me as well to come to adapt to it. I acknowledge that I came in from a practice background, and I had my own personal preconceived ideas on how we should teach some things like diabetes and and the drugs to use for the management of diabetes. Indeed, the flipped class took me a while to get used to it as well. Sorry, was there a question or? Okay.
So let's wait to see if there are any questions on the floor as well. So while waiting for the questions, maybe I have one question for me. Just wish to know, actually, can you describe a bit more detail? So how you conduct the flipped classroom a bit more so that you can have a context in the pharmacy context?
Yes, yeah. So before when I went through pharmacy education 10-15 years ago, we will have stream topics like cardiovascular, where we learn about the anatomy and the physiology, and then we learn about the drugs, and then we will progress to endocrine, where we learn about the other organ systems, and then the other drugs that are associated with it. So right now in the flipped classroom, we don't have those defined streams anymore. We have things what we call integrated care, so just to use the mic. So just describing a little bit about how the flipped classroom looks like. So right now in our Monash School in pharmacy, students start off the week where they go through some pre-class reading materials and some activities that they have to complete on their own, which gives them an overview of the disease states and the drugs. So using diabetes and heart failure, for example, again. And then when we come to class in a face-to-face environment, as an educator, I don't really spend time going through the fundamentals, pharmacology, or the biology or the sciences of it, but I straight away introduce to them a case. So with Mr. L, for example, again, and then from there, we'll go through and then get students to provide their answers and their recommendations based on their completed pre-class materials. Initially, it can sound a bit haphazard at times, but the students do commented that this initial feeling of lostness. And so after each week, we have a summary session again. So after going through their interactive lectures and their workshops, we have a summary lecture where we spend a good 1 to 2 hours where students then have the opportunity to revisit some of the concepts where they're not sure, or to even ask questions. And again, it puts a lot of pressure on the academic or the person as well, because it's almost a 1 to 2 hours freestyle where any questions could just come out on the spot. But it's definitely been a rewarding and enjoying and stimulating time for myself and also for the students. Yeah.
Thank you, Pastor.
Oh, no problem.
Right. So let's see if there are other questions. So I think.
Can you use the mic or don't you? Oh, okay.
Okay. So while waiting for maybe other questions, we still have one question maybe. So could you still maybe have time? So maybe from me. So just want to share that sometimes I notice classroom is not easy, especially for some of the students, like you mentioned. So there are maybe we assign them some of the tasks, pre-tasks to do, but they didn't do it. So you're facing this similar situation, how you overcome those challenges?
Yeah, you are exactly right. So some pre-class materials which are really vital for their learning, which students don't complete, we make it into an assessment where then students then have the intrinsic motivation because it contributes to the assessment. We obviously don't put a heavy percentage on it because of the realities of the environment, but so for them, it could be a free 3% or a free 5%, and we all know that for some students, sometimes that could be a difference from one grade to another grade. So that gives them that intrinsic motivation to persevere on with those pre-class activities.
Thank you, Basket. Sure.
No problem.
Okay, so I think thank you so much. So yeah,
thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for the time. So below. Okay. Do I need to press anything?
No need, yeah. Okay.
Right, thanks.
Thank you. Yeah. Right. So thank you, Mr. Wong. And our next presenter will be Mr. Leong Hong Tong. So I hope that Mr. Leong is ready.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, hold on. Let me just fix the. Hi, can you hear?
Yes.
Testing. I need some help. I tried changing the background previously, but I can't seem to change the background now.
No problem. No problem, Miss Leong. It's fine. Yep.
It's fine.
No.
Okay. Right, let me at least just blur it for a second. Please give me a moment. Sorry about that. But it's such a lovely background given by the organizer. I feel so sorry. Oh dear. Okay. Please hold on. All right, can you hear me now? Am I loud? Okay. All right.
Ready, Mr. Miss Leong?
All right. So, hello everyone. Good afternoon. And of course, a great thank you to the organizers and also the people who are here today to listen to my sharing. So I'm Lang Hang Tong. I'm a bit of background. I'm currently teaching in a public secondary school in Kampar Perak. I've been privileged to visit Swinburne Sarawak campus for twice, but because of these times, yeah, not as privileged as Mr. Wong just now, so I can't be there. Hopefully, I'll be able to visit the campus again in the future. So I'm here to share a bit of what I actually been very interested in, which is vocabulary knowledge. And so I actually did a small case study about vocabulary knowledge, text comprehension, and also vocabulary learning strategies among English as second language pupils in a rural area school in Selangor. And a bit of things that I will be sharing will be this: the background of study, problem statement, research questions and objectives, research methodology, key results and analysis from the findings, and conclusions, contributions, and also further recommendations. So I'm here to mainly share what I actually care really about, and also to learn from each and every one of you. So please do give feedback, and if there's any questions, please feel free to ask me as well. So yes. So just now, when we see the background of like hello and also different languages of hellos, and this actually shows that words is actually very important for us to communicate. So there's this recent conversation with my nephew saying that he mentioned about astronaut. So actually he's trying to imply for me to buy him a rocket or something. And then afterwards, when I actually mentioned the word, okay, I'm going to buy for you, and then he misunderstood the word as like buy, and very quickly he reaches out his hand to tap on the off button, and my brother has to like put it away so that he won't close the conversation, or he didn't close the chat. So that's why I feel that words are very important, and vocabulary actually affects the comprehension. Comprehension actually needs words to allow effective and authentic communication. So without vocabulary, comprehension will be affected, and hence the conversation and the awkward conversation that I had with my nephew. And if we see, vocabulary learning strategies is actually one of the tools that could be used to affect the vocabulary size of the learners, which actually affects vocabulary. And hence, vocabulary learning as a whole actually encompasses quite a lot of things, which is the communication, comprehension, vocabulary knowledge. Which brings to my problem statement of the case study. So the minimum threshold found during my research was actually 98% of the text is actually based on 3,000 frequent word families based on the literature. However, most research on the vocab size actually showed that there is correlation, but there is a gap in the setting. In terms that there is no data on the vocabulary size till date of my research among pupils studying in schools in Malaysia, namely the secondary schools and the primary schools. And the percentage of schools in Malaysia actually constitutes 56% is the major rural area schools, whereas the 44% is actually the urban area schools. And there is a gap in the public schools, especially the rural area, where the GPN national grade average shows that urban area actually have the GPN of 5.22, whereas the rural area actually gets 4.75 in 2017. Hence leads to my research objectives and also the questions. So my research objectives is to identify the average vocabulary size of the upper secondary school pupils at a rural area school in Selangor and in the Kuala Selangor district area. So the research question is, what is the average vocabulary size of upper secondary school pupils at a rural area school? And the second thing that I would like to find out is to investigate the vocabulary learning strategies being used by the upper secondary school pupils in the school, which leads to the question of how do upper secondary school pupils at a rural area school actually learn vocabulary? And the last research objective of my case study will be to investigate if there is any correlation between the vocabulary size and also the text comprehension among the upper secondary school pupils, and also is there any correlation between vocabulary size and text comprehension in English among upper secondary school pupils? So these are the strategies that I would like to find out. Research methodology, actually, I mixed quantitative and also qualitative with the approach of methodological triangulation, where I actually get 80 participants across the whole Form 4. It is ideal actually to get as many samples as possible to actually get the to ensure the low sampling error rate. However, during that time, feasibility was actually being taken into consideration, and also that I managed to find that the previous case studies, actually there are a range between like 35 to 90 samples. Hence, I've decided to stick with 80 participants. And for the qualitative, I actually get 2 of the participants from the largest and also smallest vocabulary size that I got from the online vocabulary size test, which I'm going to describe further, and also 2 other from a random sampling in the 80 participants. So the method that is used for to address the first research question is actually using an online vocabulary size test, which is actually developed by Nation, which is one of the respected professional in researching for vocabulary and also being validated. And the next one, the correlation between the vocabulary size and also the text comprehension. Also, the method that I used is using the online vocabulary size test result and also the comprehension section scores, which is taken during that year end. So this is the final year examination that I take only the part from the text comprehension marks. Whereas the last part is through questionnaire, which is actually adapted by the studies of Al-Khasawaneh and also Noor and Ameh, followed by a semi-structured interview question to find out how the students actually learn vocabulary at the rural area school. Oops. So the result that I find for research question 1, which is the average vocabulary size, is actually 5,000 to 5,900, which is the average number of the word families being tested from the 80 students that I've tested. And the lowest score of the participant was actually 2,800, while the highest is actually 9,700. So this actually can serve as a reference to investigate the vocabulary size to actually from different rural area schools to actually find whether to actually clarify the average vocabulary size among the students. Pardon me. Next one will be to address whether there is correlation. So the results that I've got, actually I've used inferential statistics analysis using Excel and also SPSS to confirm. And this is rather high positive relationship between the vocabulary size and also the comprehension among the ESL learners, English as second language learners, with some outliers, which I'm going to further explain on that. So there are three distinct outliers. So whereby one actually show that it's actually pretty high, 7,600 word families, but low comprehension score, as in around 7. And there are two showed an adequate amount of the vocabulary, which is in the range of 4,000 to 5,000 word families, with a better text comprehension score, which is 70 marks. So the full marks is actually 25. So it may actually agree with the Schmitz and Schmitz idea that 3,000 word families is actually the threshold for the text comprehension. However, the outlier is significantly considered as a small percentage as compared to the whole data that I've managed to gather. So next is actually the vocabulary learning strategies being used. So it's been found in that school. Social strategy actually encompasses the highest percentage, which is the mean of 3.20. And also the most used subcategory is actually this one. When I encounter unknown words, I'll ask my classmates or friends for meaning in Malay. So this is especially useful for like teachers, educators to, as a reference, to actually better facilitate students in learning vocabularies and also in learning language, especially English in this context. Next one will be actually metacognitive strategy. So it is the second most frequently used strategy in that particular school. So the mean is actually 3.06, which is actually, I only focus on things that are related to examinations and I look up words that I'm interested in. The next one would be memory strategy. It is another strategy, but it is least favored by the participants in that school. So from the data collected, actually, there are 3 out of 7 that is responded with a higher usage of seldom use. So seldom use, and also to never. So this involves memorizing the word list and also defining and also identifying the meaning of words through reading. Next one would be cognitive strategy. So in terms of cognitive strategy, this one is also another least used strategy gathered from the participants that I've gathered. So there are having vocabulary notebook to list down new words and also only taking notes of the meaning of the word. Next will be determination strategy. So these 5 strategies are actually developed by Schmidt, and determination strategy is what he introduced as one of the ways to improve upon taxonomy discovered by the Oxford. So from his literature, he said that Oxford taxonomy actually does not fully cover other strategies. Hence, he actually introduces determination strategy, and under this, these are the subcategories. And it is found that the highest being used is bilingual dictionary. This is the result actually being, this is the result from the interview, semi-structured interview being conducted with the 4 students. And the transcripts are transcribed verbatim, and they are interviewed using either English or Malay, whichever they find comfortable, and then it's translated and then being verified by the head of panel of the school. So what's been found is that determination strategy, bilingual dictionary, is one of the strategies being frequently used by the participants. And better performing pupils based on the lowest and also the highest as a representation of the group data. Actually, it shows that better performing pupils use almost all the strategies, and they suggested reading to increase their vocabulary. Whereas the weak performing pupils, based on the small group of the pupils that I've interviewed, although they use a few strategies, they do have a dominant strategy. So the conclusion from the case study is that 5,000 to 5,900 word families is actually the average vocabulary size of the rural area school students in that district and also in that school in that form, but it provides a baseline reference for further research in rural area schools because the percentage of rural area schools is higher as compared to the urban area schools. And vocabulary size does affect the text comprehension. Also, what's been found is that the most popular strategies among the rural area pupils are the social strategy, social skills, social strategies, and also the bilingual dictionary. So the idea of having this case study is hoped to actually provide a reference and also an awareness among the educators to be able to plan in the English teaching and also learning experience, and also to provide a curriculum which is more focused towards what the learners actually need. So some of the recommendations from my findings would be similar studies could be actually done in different rural area schools for finding out the minimum threshold for the secondary school pupils or even primary school pupils, the average minimum threshold of the vocabulary size, so that we could actually better facilitate them in their English language learning, and also even urban area schools. And curriculum syllabus could be actually revised, even though now we have the new CEFR aligned syllabus for public schools. Not sure about other systems, but for public schools now we're actually using CEFR aligned syllabus, and hence actually more focus has been given to vocabulary. However, the word list could still be referred and also be studied to better cater to different range of vocabulary size learners. And also, hopefully, the vocabulary learning strategies that is being found out by the study, which actually will give like a reference or at least an awareness to introduce to new pedagogies, as we know now that we have a lot of new upcomings, new trends of learning, 21st century learnings and whatnot, could be actually integrated in language learning, especially vocabulary learning for the learners. So thank you very much for lending me your ear. That's all from my sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Leong. It's such an insightful sharing and finding. Okay,
Thank you very much.
For the questions and answers. So, yep. So if anyone has questions, then we can. I think you can come in front because the mic is open. Sure. Thank you. Okay. Introduce yourself.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, my name is Eunice.
Sorry, Eunice.
My name is Eunice. Yeah.
Hi, Eunice.
I was just wondering, because you mentioned like the contributions can be for the syllabus, but how do you think that the results of this study can affect individuals in individual teachers in the way that they teach vocabulary? So maybe in relation to like strategies, like could you give us an example maybe?
Meaning that the findings that I got from the vocabulary learning strategies, how teachers can actually use it to teach in classrooms, is it? Is that what you meant?
Yes. So how can like individual teachers, because maybe they
Yeah.
can't change the syllabus, they can't change the curriculum. So how can
Yes.
individual teachers themselves like use this as to help them improve in their teaching in the class?
Thank you very much. This is something that I find quite challenging for me as well, and hence that's why I actually studied in this. So I think personally, because sorry, there's echo. Hello, can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
All right. In my opinion, I think that the findings that we can actually get, like for individual teachers, this is actually like a reference. So what we can do as individual teachers in classrooms, we know our learners best. So I think we could actually adhere the online vocabulary size test to the students in terms of like pre-test and also post-test. But if let's say our capacity doesn't allow us to do so, perhaps we can do at least we gauge their minimum vocabulary size or average vocabulary size of the class, and then we could actually find out the vocabulary learning strategies that could work well for them. So what I actually find from the school is to use bilingual dictionary, and also they tend to use a lot of social learning strategy. So I would pair them up with peers, and then they could actually learn that better. So I hope that helps. Of course, because this one, the generalizability is not that high, and it's quite limited due to the feasibility and also the capacity of the researcher, which is me. But I do hope that this is a reference to show that this could be done, and this is what I'm actually practicing in my current school as well. So yes, I hope that helps.
Right. I think yes, so thank you. So there is the next questions from the website as well.
Yes, please.
Hello.
Hi.
Good afternoon.
Hi, good
My name is
afternoon.
Chato, and I
Hi,
am in
Mr.
a
Paul.
very particular situation, which is a rural school in Chinese school. So I feel that this research is very relevant to me, and I feel that this is very relevant to other teachers in the rural school. So I feel this is a very pioneering study which could help us. So since you mentioned that you are pioneering this to help your school, so my one question is, what are the challenges when you doing this case study and present it to your school? That's all.
Thank you very much. So the challenges that I faced upon conducting this study and also presenting to my school, is it? So during that time, when I was in, okay, actually we're not supposed to review that we are actually doing in which out of like ethics, but I think should be okay lah, yeah, because teachers from teachers perspective. So the main concern is, yes, because I was concerned of my students learning, and hence when I find out, I try to propose it to my head of panel. Of course, we still have other challenges in terms of like, chasing the syllabus, racing against time. But very thankfully, my head of panel, they are quite supportive of the idea. So they do actually promote vocabulary learning as well during that time. But I think now it is more how to say, it is more helpful for us as teachers in terms of like, promote vocabulary learning, as it's already in the syllabus as well for public schools. And yes, I do hope that more studies about like a rural area learning vocabulary could be done, so that it can be more significant in terms of like projecting the data of like, this is the minimum average that we could see from like different parts of the country's rural area ESL or even EFL learners. And these are some of the strategies that could be carried out in terms of like teaching vocabulary. Yes, so thank you so much, Mr. Ho, for your question. I hope that I answered that.
I think it's very satisfying to apply. So with the limited time, I think we still have time to allow for last question. Okay? Yeah, thank you.
So thank you, MC. I'm ready. So I have
Already.
question. Like you provide a statistic and shows about most of the rural areas and family of students didn't have much English knowledge or not really good in vocabulary, right? So is it a good idea to have a free English tuition or extra vocabulary classes for them to let them have chances to gain more knowledge? Or do you have any idea on helping them to increase their knowledge about towards vocabulary?
Ideas on improving or increasing the vocabulary knowledge of the learners, is it? My main findings, or my main study is actually to find out like the vocabulary learning strategies. I think that one is more towards the motivation of the learners, which is another factors which contributes to the whole language learning process. But in my personal opinion, I do think that it's very much up to the learners and also the teachers or educators to motivate the learners, as in learning language is not something that could be done like with just drills, but it has to be done very gradually and also what we call like in a disciplined manner. So I do think that different learners, they have different ways of learning. Some they work very well with like extra classes, whereas some works really well with just like listening to songs and listening. Yeah, that's why it is very catered to the learners themselves. But I do think that the ones that you mentioned just now will be very helpful for the learners. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so when I look at time, so actually we still have time another question. So if you mind, so if any one of us would like to, yeah, sure. So it's in a section of learning together.
I'm just wondering, is it what kind of post test and pre test do you do? Like what is the type? Is it like a standard? What kind of test do you do?
I see. So I just use the standardized one, and I use the online vocabulary size test, which I've mentioned just now. It's actually developed by Nation and also the Victoria University of Wellington, if I remember the name correctly. Yeah, and I tend to use that one as the fixed test so that I could actually I administer to the kids and ask them to do, because now it's quite online, and also like I use a little bit of like flipped classroom strategy as well. So I will ask the kids to actually do the test, and the data will be actually kept and also for my reference. But of course, before that, prior to that, I'll be explaining to them like this is the test that I would like you to do, so that I have an idea where is your vocabulary range, because I do think that it affects the text comprehension. And it's actually been proven by the literatures as well, whereby the learners have to reach at least a minimum threshold for them to comprehend the text. So I do use one fixed test, but I do not develop it on my own. I do not have that that level yet, but I do use the online one. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I think the time is up already. Thank you so much. It's a
Thank
very
you.
thank you, Ms. Leong.
Thank you so much for the time. Thank you for the questions.
All right. So now we're going to our last presenter of today for this session. It's Dr. Anton Kwa. So I think Dr. Anton should be around. Okay. Hi, hello. So maybe you want to do some, try to share slide from your end. And at the same time, let me announce the topic that Dr. Anton is going to present. So Dr. Anton is going to present his work with the title pharmaceutical science education to meet the pharmaceutical industry needs in Malaysia. Yeah. So if all is set and ready from your side, Dr. Anton, you can ready for your presentation. Thank you.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. So then let me start. And first of all, let me introduce myself and thank you for you listening me here now online. I am a coordinator of pharmaceutical science program and an associate professor in School of Pharmacy at Monash University, Malaysia. So what I'm going to share with you are finding on pharmaceutical science education and how this education meets or potentially meets pharmaceutical industry needs in Malaysia. But before I go to results of our study, let me start with some history. So from as far as 1975, when Johann Bartholomeus Tromsdorf established Chemical Physical Pharmaceutical Institute. It was a time when pharmacy became a science of making drugs. So this is when we start teaching pharmacy as a science of making drugs. So at the very beginning. And that is what Tromsdorf said, that chemistry or art of compounding is a capital part of pharmacy. And the apothecary who is not thoroughly familiar with this science will be a miserable bungler in his profession. So this changes of pharmacy from a craft to a learned profession continues with the father of organic chemistry, Justus von Liebig, who also opened an institute for training pharmacists and chemists. So from that time, pharmacy and organic chemistry developed in parallel and were often taught together. So we had all this idea of science coming into a pharmacy. Then in the 20th century, situation changed. After the First World War, the center of world in pharmacy education shifted more from Europe to US. And in 1927, the basic material for a pharmaceutical curriculum was formulated there. And in 1932, Accreditation Council for Pharmaceutical Education was formed. Well, since everything is moved from Europe to US, there is no surprise that both practice and education in pharmacy started their drift from some scientific interest more towards merchandising and commercial interests. However, since medicine at that time were still mainly prepared by pharmacists in pharmacy, extemporary drug preparation constituted the main focus on pharmacy education even at that time. All right. Well, then the market for drug, all that landscape completely changed by 1950s, when everything started with a mass production of pre-formulated medicine by pharmaceutical industry. So compounding as a main activity in the pharmacy became very minor. So about 25% in 1950s to 5% in 1960s and just 1% in 1970s and about that, probably less than that now. Well, however, at the same time, all this medicine became more complex and the pharmacy profession became more clinically focused with longer training required. So in US, that resulted with the first Doctor of Pharmacy PharmD degree offered in 1950s, and then it was offered more and more. And at the end, in 1989, Accreditation Council for Pharmaceutical Education made a decision to adopt this degree as a universal standard for pharmacy education by 2000, at least in the US. So this transition completed by 2005, and pharmacist profession moved away from chemistry, right? When it started everything from drug production to something more clinically oriented and patient-centered. So who will make drug then? Who will train these people? So it became a time for a birth of pharmaceutical sciences as another separate degree. So Monash University is #2 in QS ranking for pharmacy and pharmacology, and I'm proud working at Monash. And so I will briefly show you how this pharmaceutical science program were developed at Monash University. So in 2000, so very timely, the Bachelor of Formulation Science was introduced together to the existing Bachelor of Pharmacy program. So then it was transformed into a Bachelor of Medicinal Chemistry, further transformed in 2008 into a Bachelor of Pharmaceutical Sciences with a few specializations. And next year, very soon, Monash University will start offering Master of Pharmaceutical Sciences in Australia. So we believe that it is time to start such degrees also in Malaysia campus of Monash too. Well, first we need to confirm that these programs are suitable for Malaysia, for pharmaceutical industry here. And therefore we came with an aim of our study to understand specific requirements of the pharmaceutical industry in Malaysia for a workforce education and their expectation for pharmaceutical graduates at both bachelor and master levels. So for the methods of assessment, we decided to use internet-based SurveyMonkey platform. And that was our instrument to contact a representative from pharmaceutical industry and related companies operating in Malaysia. Some respondents, though, preferred to answer our question in the format of phone interview. We analyzed responses in 3 main domains. So demand for pharmaceutical science graduates, career pathway and employability for potential graduates, and how curriculum content and fits needs of the industry and how relevant it is. But before I go to the results of our study, let me briefly share with you information about the curriculum of these 2 courses. So it's about exactly information which was given to our responders at that time. So Bachelor of Pharmaceutical Science curriculum is a 3-year program. So we have about 4 different units per year, with the exception of year 3, when we have 3 main units, 3 core units for semester 1, and the 4th one is a core elective when students can select what they prefer for their specialization, and a similar situation for a 2nd semester when they have 2 main units and a number of elective units to choose from. So they should choose 2 out of 6 offered to them. For MPharm Science curriculum, we have a 2 years degree, and it starts with a few different starting and entry points. So the entry point for Cognite degrees is part A. So an education will continue for full 2 years. And for those who graduated from Bachelor of Pharmaceutical Science, they can enter the course from part B, and that will be 1.5 year study. So that information with unit titles were given to our responders. And overall, we collected results from 25 pharmaceutical, nutraceutical, cosmeceutical, and all other related industries. About 2/3 of this company were locally owned, so it's quite a tale with what quite representative to the actual situation with pharmaceutical industry in Malaysia. So majority of these companies, about 70%, they nutraceutical among their products, drug, cosmeceuticals, traditional medicines were also mentioned there. And this distribution is quite similar to what is expected if we look at the general pattern of Malaysia pharmaceutical industry as licensed by Drug Control Authority. So despite relatively small proportion, just about 36% of those who work there in drug with actual drugs, they occupy quite a significant market share and can also employ a larger number of graduates. So if we assess the responses of our responders about demand, it looks like graduates in pharmaceutical sciences are really needed by pharmaceutical industry globally. So 44% says it as a high demand and 52% as a substantial demand. So there is a significant demand for such graduates globally, and quite similar demand, also 96% overall, would be in Malaysia. So then we look at potential career pathway and employability of our graduates. So all respondents agree that the Bachelor of Pharmaceutical Science program will produce the right graduates for pharmaceutical industry. However, some organizations, about 12%, which do not work in with actual drugs. So that's mainly manufactured for traditional medicine, cosmeceutical, and nutraceutical products. So these responders believe that these graduates will not suit directly their companies. And then for Master of Pharmaceutical Sciences product, well, more positions are available at bigger pharmaceutical companies when we ask about number of potential graduates to be employed. But number of posts in smaller organization is limited, and therefore we have a bit lower number of those who believe that this graduates will be suitable for their industry. So for work areas suitable for potential employee with this organization, we have a laboratory in research development, clinical trials, manufacturing, quality control and insurance, medical affairs, regulatory affairs, and also some sales and marketing. So quite broad scope of activity suitable for our potential graduates. When we assess a curriculum content and relevance based on the responses from the industry, well, the most of the responders agree that program covers the basic theory and it is relevant and up to date. There is a concern, though, about covering whether everything is covered. And I believe it's linked to the limitation of our study. I show you information about the curriculum which was given to our responders. And, well, this information is rather limited and within a time constraint of the survey and the interview format. Responders may not get detailed information about the curriculum, which is covered in every specific unit, and they wouldn't be able to guess it just from the title. So it might appear that some information appeared to responders missing, even though it was there. So we will address this later. Also, probably a relatively small number of responses it's about 10% of those registered in Malaysia. Well, it was difficult to collect all the responses with that COVID lockdown situation. So that's might introduce a bit of an error and give additional weightage for the responses, even though that represent a relatively smaller number of organizations, and this organization might not come from those who share a significant market. If we look at the Master of Pharmaceutical Science program, and well, most of our responders were slightly more in favor of this program, but in general, their responses were quite similar. We have a quite similar picture to the one we have for Bachelor of Pharmaceutical Sciences. So to conclude, so despite some limitation, right, Bachelor of Pharmaceutical Science and Master of Pharmaceutical Science program, which we trying to propose for Monash University, Malaysia, are current and relevant to the Malaysian pharmaceutical industry needs. And we believe that more detailed discussion with stakeholders is required just to make sure that curricula of both programs meet industry needs, so we can figure out what our responders believe is not covered and make sure that this is included in the curriculum. So I would like to acknowledge support for this research by Learning Teaching Grant from our School of Pharmacy, Monash University, Malaysia. And I also want to thank Redna for the help in the data collection with the interviews. Thank you very much.
Okay, so now is the time for questions and answer sections. Anyone of us questions for us? So still I know from the on site here, and maybe let me check at the message. So maybe a question from me, just curious to know. I'm not sure whether this will be sensitive or not.
Very specific topic, and the last presentation, I think.
So just curious to know the employment risk from the graduates from this program.
We haven't started this program yet, so we are planning to start them. So then we will know. Currently, if we compare it to what we have in Australia, we have quite a good percentage of employees. So almost all of our graduates are employed, and they employed within the industry, and they're well employed even in the areas which were found to be more problematic by our responders here in Malaysia. So again, I believe it's just a lack of detailed understanding of the curriculum. They couldn't really guess from the title that areas are also covered. Yep.
Thank you. So, and maybe a last question for me, if it's no more from the side. Because I'm from engineering background, actually. So, for example, like engineering, we do have a government body actually specifically to regulate the engineering program. So I'm not sure in Malaysian context, they have specific pharmacist regulation on these applications. Pharmacist program.
Sorry, could you repeat what?
I just wish to know, is there any government body regulate the pharmacist education program? I just curious to know.
Yeah, well, I'm trying to hear. Sorry, just all right. So if I understand you correctly. So sorry if I go to a different direction. Please stop me. And currently we have pharmacy as a main degree offered here in Malaysia. So the pharmacy profession is well, I think well covered by existing degrees. So we can produce right graduates, and these graduates well fit the current pharmacy settings. When it goes to the pharmaceutical industry, the pharmacy curriculum become more clinical and more patient-centered, so it will not provide a significant experience and skills, hands-on skills, first of all, for those who need to enter to the industry. So this is what we are trying to achieve here. And by achieving that, we're not aiming to produce pharmacists, right? So we don't need that for pharmacists to, this graduates to be accredited as a pharmacist. And so their employability will be limited more towards the industry. They wouldn't be eligible to work in pharmacy as pharmacists. I don't know whether that answers your question.
Yes, definitely. I do have some friend is quite fit to the category what you described, so yeah, understand what you're saying. All right, thank you so much. Yeah, I think it should be that's all for the questions and answers. Thank you so much, Dr. Anton, for sharing it. So with that, we have concluded our sessions for this sharing, and I think we're going to have a break, and there's sections for the ceremony for the closing. So later at 4:15, yeah, for the closing sections. So now we're going to have a tea break outside again, and see you again. Thank you, everyone.